We also don't know yet, or indeed if, how these changes are manifesting themselves in fox behavior. It's not possible to simply match up what a fox does with its skull shape or even its brain size. Fox intelligence is not something that we have extensively studied yet compared with other animals, but the evidence is starting to appear. In one study, foxes from a range of different habitats across the UK were presented with puzzle boxes containing treats. To get the food, the animal needed to open the box by biting, pulling, pushing, or lifting it, and while city foxes were more likely to approach and interact with the boxes than country foxes, there was no difference in their likelihood of actually getting to the food. Rather than selecting for a super smart new breed of foxes, city life may be doing the opposite. Consistent with the skull changes, when food is so abundant in the city, the most successful foxes may not be the ones that can use their wits, as much as the ones that can overcome their shyness and fear of humans. That's an excerpt from this brilliant book, whose author I'm about to speak to. Welcome, everybody, back to Conservation Conversations. And before I welcome Jo into the room, a very quick update. The Royal Albert Hall show is less than a week away. See you there. We had a really enjoyable rehearsal for it for our fan club members on the weekend, and it went fantastically. If you'd like to join the fan club and be party to some of those kinds of exclusive secret events, then please check out the fan club online. Just Google Stornoway Fan Club and sure you'll find it. The other news is that this weekend is the Manchester Folk Festival. So see you there. And without further ado, here is my guest for today, the most amazing, wonderful friend of the band for many years and author of this brilliant new book, Jo Wimpenny. Hello, Jo. How are you today?
Oh, hey, Ollie. Thanks for the lovely introduction. I'm well. How are you?
I'm very well. It's been really fun to reread the book, looking ahead to our discussion today. And I guess I told you a few days ago, my favorite chapter had been Keep Calm and Carry On.
Yes.
That one, I think, was from Naughty Neighbours, wasn't it? And they've all got wonderful chapters. Snake in the Grass. These are the chapters. Easy on the Eye.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about Beauty of the Beasts and where the idea for that came from?
Yes. So Beauty of the Beasts, I like to think of as kind of my love letter to all of the animals that we experience these negative reactions to. So all of the animals that we love to hate, really. The snakes and the sharks and cockroaches. So animals that we have these instinctive fear reactions to, but also animals that we look at and we think, oh, they're a bit disgusting. Maggots, they feature in one of the chapters as well. Animals that we judge based on our perceptions of their attractiveness. So I have one chapter all about how attractiveness influences conservation, which it absolutely does. And so I've sort of accumulated all of the creatures that we tend to write off. And I've tried to make a case for why they're all extremely valuable, and many of them are actually, a lot more sentient than we think. We kind of have this idea that certain animals are villains, and that's all embedded in our popular culture and our stories. Certain animals always play the bad guys, but I want us to look past that, and I want to nudge us to rethink what these animals are really doing and why they're doing what they're doing, and to think of them more in terms of their animal terms. They're not little people, and many of the things they do are both ecologically really, really vital, and cognitively a lot more sophisticated than I think we give them the credit.
Well, I'm really excited to have you as the first guest in our new series of Conservation Conversations, which will see a lot of conservationist writers and workers come in and chat to me about what they've been doing. I'm especially excited because what you've done there is something that I'm going to ask all the guests to do, which is break apart misconceptions around conservation efforts and why sometimes they don't work as well as we hoped, and as well as, say, the funding as is aimed at achieving. So one of the things you said there about how we tend to conserve or care about the cutest or the most relatable species. And would you say that's a misconception that is common amongst conservation societies?
It's a really tricky point, because yes, I think undoubtedly the animals that are big, they tend to be the large mammals, the ones with front-facing eyes, animals that are most like us, animals that are charismatic, cute, cuddly. They have tended to have the lion's share of conservation effort. And there is good reason for that, because these are the animals that most people feel some sort of connection to. And it does work. So that, take the case of the giant panda, obviously the mascot for WWF, and has been for many years. And Chris Packham famously said that he would eat the last giant panda if it would release funds for saving other animals. So, I mean, that was a point that sparked a lot of debate. I remember it at the time. And his point is that conservation should be about conserving more than just a single species. But on the other hand, giant panda conservation, because so many people are on board with saving this cute, cuddly, charismatic mammal, it's raised so much funding, and it has led to protection of huge areas of the panda's natural habitat in China. So, I think it's a complicated point, because yes, we do need for people to care about a much broader array of wildlife. And in order to care about them, they need to be aware of them. And if conservation keeps being channeled into the creatures that people are already aware of and already have these kind of positive feelings to, then there's a lot of the natural world that's being overlooked. So it's kind of a difficult balance. But yes, I mean, I think when the public think of wildlife conservation, it tends to be for these kind of poster animals of conservation campaigns, the tigers, elephants, the panda, and all of these creatures. And that more is being done, but undoubtedly it's harder to get people to put money towards a worm than it might be to put money to a tiger.
Well, one of the approaches that we take as Stornoway, as you know, because dear listeners, Jo has followed Stornoway since day dot, has come to all the early gigs.
Yeah.
So we go way back. But so you'll know this better than anyone. We sing about wildlife and maybe personify certain species, especially seabirds. That's a favorite of Brian's, and migratory birds. And it's something that you do as well in this brilliant book. I want to let people know you can go grab it from Bloomsbury, Beauty of the Beasts. There's also a fantastic audiobook edition if you like that. But one of the things that this has in common with a lot of Stornoway's output is bringing the almost humanoid stories of these animals, something that personifies and sends them out on an adventure and gets you to relate to them. So that's undoubtedly a great way of getting people to understand these different species and care about their well-being. So thanks for doing that, Jo.
No, well, it's wonderful to have the opportunity to tell their stories. And I think that communicating with the public, and especially about this topic, when it's a harder sell to encourage people to care about wasps and snakes and things that they don't have these feelings towards. So I think it's really important to tell them as stories, because as we well know, in all sort of swathes from society, just bombarding people with facts doesn't work. And you do, Stornoway does it so well as well in the music, and that's what makes people feel emotions, and we need to feel those emotions in order to care.
Thank you. And I guess another way is to widen the scope of looking at a species or a group of species, widen it to the whole ecosystem, and in songs like Excelsior, we talk about ash dieback, and then in your book, you're relating to some of the wasps and other species affected by the loss of a single tree species. You did that really great reading before we played it at Sunday's rehearsal. But what I see we both like to do is zoom out and show people that even if they don't care about all the species around, say, the panda or the tiger, the loss of any of those key critical creatures in the food chain, say, in that ecosystem, could lead to the loss of that very species that they do care about. So education about the interdependencies in the different ecosystems is really important, and that's something I really enjoyed about your book. It goes into some really good hardcore researched detail that a lot of other conservation books perhaps don't, because they try to be too much about the personifying. But I really like that yours strikes that balance between the scientific and the storytelling.
Oh, that's good. Thank you. Yes, I don't want to get too down in the data, but I think it's important.
Yeah. And I think it has that in common with Aesop's Animals, your previous book, right? Do you want to tell us briefly about how that book went and what inspired that, and perhaps what led you from that one to this?
Yeah, sure. So Aesop's Animals was my first public-facing, so yeah, popular science book. And it really came about because, as you know, Ollie, I was doing my PhD on crows, and so my background is in crow intelligence. And one of the main fables, one of my Aesop's main fables, is the crow and the pitcher, where a thirsty crow is desperate to get some water and is faced with a water jug, but he can't reach the water, and so it drops stones in to raise the water level. And so that was something I was kind of aware of while I was doing my PhD. And then I left academia, I became much more interested in communicating science, and this idea of the Aesop's fable of the crow and the pitcher was just, I thought it was a really nice way to get into talking about what animals do by marrying up something that people are so familiar with. I think most people will know of Aesop's fables, or they'll have a favorite fable perhaps, and so that was my way into it. I thought it provided a really nice hook to get into talking about animal behavior. But then the more I went into that book, the more I realized that it was actually a really important issue, this kind of idea of how, where our preconceptions of animals come from, and a lot of it is built out of these popular stories, fables and myths that people have been telling for centuries, if not millennia, and they've sort of solidified the reputations of animals in certain ways. So I think it's really important to challenge those sometimes. So that's what I wanted to do with Aesop's Animals. And I talked about, are wolves actually deceptive villains? The wolf in sheep's clothing. Could ants actually think ahead and plan for the future? Could a tortoise ever really beat a hare in a race, and that sort of thing? And yeah, that's just got me thinking more and more about the human-animal relationship and the ways that we form these ideas about different creatures. And so this book, Beauty of the Beasts, was, I'd say an evolution of that way of thinking, but focused, on the ones that we just don't like.
Thank you. It's really interesting to get behind the kind of motivation and the narrative of the motivation for the different books. And I can't wait to see what you do next. Hopefully it won't be long before the next book. I'd like to also now move us into observing nature. So in the context of these conservation conversations, I always ask guests what they've been noticing around them as the seasons change. And perhaps we can relate it back to the book. Is there any, perhaps a species in here that you want to talk to us about by saying what signs you've seen of spring or perhaps even early summer?
Oh, I'm trying to think of the book. I mean, I get so excited at the beginning of spring. I love seeing all of the signs, but a lot of them, I have to say, are the ones that they're quite beloved for people because I think because they are an early sign of spring. So, you know, seeing the first brimstone butterfly is a real treat. I've seen a few of those. You know, I heard my first chiff-chaffs on the weekend, and it felt like the world shifted from being, you know, I hadn't heard any chiff-chaffs, and then suddenly it was like all I could hear, just like chiff-chaffs everywhere. So yeah, all of these signs, you know, I get so excited when I see the first female hazel flowers. I don't know if you spot them. They're these tiny little, they're like magenta tentacles, and they literally are only a couple of millimeters across. And they're the female flowers of the hazel, and they're out and about sort of end of January. That's when I saw my first ones, and that's always like a really key sign for me. But I'm trying to think about the book and whether there is anything in there that I've seen. I haven't seen any snakes, but Jane did send me a video of a snake that she'd seen on the Gower recently, so that was lovely to see. Of course, in this country we don't see snakes in the way that I talk about them in the book, and the way that they're perceived, especially in the US and in other countries, but they're more of a rarity here.
Yes, growing up in South Africa, one of the key elements of any wildlife sort of education I received was snake venom types, and where or what the coding was of different bites you would receive, and how to get to the nearest hospital and describe your wound properly, because some of the fangs make a certain shape of wound, and that could save your life if you have that knowledge. So yeah, I was glad to sort of jettison a lot of that content when I eventually moved here and settled and started to have other things to worry about, like bass lines and songs. But it's not too early to mention that there's a chance Stornoway will be heading out to South Africa at some point this year. So I might need to do a quick refresher in case we head out on these safari trips.
Yeah, you'll need to have your snake knowledge.
Yes. Well, thanks. My signs of spring this year have been the magnolias. They've been particularly pretty around where I am, and then the skylarks ascending outside a field in Oxford the other day when we were there for the rehearsal. I managed to get out for a little jog in the morning, and the skylark, I hadn't been expecting it, but there was a whole gang of them occupying their respective patches in that field. It was very uplifting.
It's such a beautiful sound, isn't it, to hear that? Yeah, it really is a sound. I mean, that's a sound of summer for me, the skylarks. Yeah.
Okay, well, I would like to now ask you one of the other questions I ask all my conservation conversation guests. But as I say, we're moving into this new season where we're going to move away from musical guests, composers, songwriters, performers, and into people who are doing really hard work of writing about, communicating, or even getting hands-on with biodiversity conservation. So the answers might be different this time, and certainly the question is different. So it's the first time I'll ask this in the following way. So the question is, Jo, what's an outstandingly effective conservation effort that you've seen and that you think could serve as a template for future conservation societies to follow?
These are pretty difficult questions. I think trying to identify a single conservation initiative is really hard, actually, because there's so many incredible things that people are doing, and like it's really tempting to think that the world is an awful place at the moment, isn't it? I mean, but there are so many people who are doing incredible work in conservation, and so it feels hard to pick one out. But I mean, I would say everything that's grounded in community involvement are the most powerful conservation initiatives, I think. And so well, I suppose this also links a little bit into your earlier question. And sorry, if I'm waffling, you can just interrupt me. But in thinking about like what some of the misconceptions are from people, and the conservation funding one is one, but I think another big misconception is that loss of biodiversity is something that happens in other places. It's like, it's something that's, it's the coral reefs or it's the rainforest or whatever, but it's happening here, and it's happening on our doorsteps.
Yeah.
And so, there are fantastic community initiatives that are going on in urban centres where people are just coming together to create wildlife gardens. And it's not a big and flashy initiative, but it's something that gets local people together, and it gets them to care, and it makes them excited about the things that are on their doorstep. And I think these are the sorts of things that we really need for education and for community good, because it's wonderful to have that kind of shared interest. And I suppose related, one of the examples that I talk about in the book, again, it's a community-based conservation initiative, and it's something happening in India, and it's conservation of this big ugly stork called the greater adjutant. And when I did my reading for you on the weekend, I did mention I've got a bit in the book about the marabou stork, and it's sort of repulsive. The observation I made of it in the aftermath of the Great Migration. The adjutant is a bit like the marabou stork, lives in India, and again, it's a scavenger. And it had been revered by people for its scavenging because it keeps the streets clean. But that reverence has turned to revulsion in recent years, and people's ideas have changed about it, and they've become more prone to persecute it. And the stork's numbers have really crashed. So, but this community initiative, it's an all-women conservation group called the Hargila Army. So the name of the bird is also Hargila. And what they've been doing is trying to nudge people's perceptions of this bird away from it being ugly and repulsive, and towards it actually being something quite beautiful. And the way that they've done this is to weave little motifs of this bird into traditional fabrics, and so to make clothing. And so they're kind of pairing it with fashion, and they have quadrupled the number of storks in their area, which is just incredible. So, they're making it more familiar to people. They're creating these positive associations, and I think this kind of thing is really exciting and really good, sustainable ways to further wildlife's chances.
That's brilliant. I think I really like the refreshing tone of that, because we have so many examples and entire documentaries and channels dedicated to the negative side of discussing environmental conservation, saying we're quickly running out of certain populations. We've got to do something now. It's bad news everywhere. But to understand there are positive stories that can be told, which then bring people along for the ride and encourage them more than it's a carrot versus stick approach. I think that's one reason why in music making as well, when we find that we tell positive, hopeful, adventurous stories about species, people can fall in love more easily rather than fall into sort of fear and inaction. So thank you very much for that reflection.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's people need hope, I think, and I think we do need to remember that there are good things going on, and that people will care. There are lots of people that care, and it's about bringing, like you say, bringing other people along with that.
And Springwatch, you mentioned Chris Packham. Springwatch as one of the many things he's done is a great example, I think, because it's quite a hopeful, enjoyable show. People get really excited to tune in when they've got their show on in the evenings. I'd love to see more shows like that. So my next question is about misconceptions, like we said earlier, but I'd like to kind of widen the scope of that and ask you whether amongst the different conservation societies and projects you've seen, is there one major misconception you've seen, maybe where a project has gone wrong because the whole way it's been communicated or thought through is based on a fundamental misunderstanding?
That's a harder question. I think projects can only go on the scientific information that they've got at that point. So there are examples of projects that haven't gone well, but mostly that's just because they don't have the information that they need at that point. But I'm trying to think of, I don't have anything off the top of my head, Ollie.
It's all right. Well, I think it might help for me to offer one example from our side. So when we've been involved in the past, it's actually exactly what you're saying. With the Marine Conservation Society, we raised money by selling a single back in the day, the Good Fish Guide.
Yeah.
So everything that the MCS Marine Conservation Society has done, as far as I've been able to see, has been really brilliant. High impact conservation work with very little investment to play with, but they've made some great impacts on conserving fish species. But then you do read about perhaps further afield out there in the world where the misunderstanding of an entire fish population, or simply because the data haven't been gathered and the species hasn't actually been counted recently, but people can get behind what feels like a sensible, rational initiative. So there was this documentary 2-3 years ago, I think, where someone went out and discovered that many of the tuna cans that you can buy, which say that they're from sustainable sources, are actually tuna from ships that don't count exactly what they're catching. And it's just that they were sort of paying a fee to some general trademark body who were able to give them an accreditation. It was more like paying for the fish brand that you're buying to have a stamp, rather than for them to actually have done anything responsible. And I can't remember the name of the documentary. I'll quickly look it up, but it was about that fundamental misconception and how it was actually damaging, because the people who thought that their money was going to conserving tuna and other ocean fish species was sort of investing in their destruction. I was just mentioning Seaspiracy, which is the name of the film.
Oh, yeah. Yes. And yeah, so listening to you talk about that, I guess when I thought about the question initially, I was kind of thinking about misguided conservation efforts, whereas I tend to think that most people who are doing conservation programs have good intent, and they're doing the best that they can with the resources that they've got. But it did make me think about things that are dressed up as conservation, which are not ultimately, they don't have conservation at their heart, and whether that's for tourism purposes, or I'm thinking about having been on a safari trip to the Masai Mara, and this was a few years ago, and I think a lot of people and a lot of your listeners will know that there are some operators in the Masai Mara that don't operate particularly responsibly and ethically, and my friend and I were among one of those trips, which we didn't realize, but the driver had no problem with revving and going straight up to an animal, a mother leopard that was nursing, or cheetahs that were just there, and seeing them surrounded by all of these vehicles was just really quite distressing. And it's sort of, so I think things like that, where people, members of the general public, perhaps they don't understand, they're sort of trusting that that the people that they're with have the animal's best interests at heart, and there's just a lot of that on social media as well, or for example going to places where you can have you can swim with dolphins in a water park, or have a painting done by an elephant, or whatever it is, and it's just exploiting. It's very exploitative, and it's manipulating the public into thinking that they might be doing something beneficial.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think, we can see that every time we log on to social media, because at any cost, likes and content at any cost, and that's why I really enjoy having these conversations, because what we're trying to do is to steer people on these platforms towards slightly more wholesome content, and hopefully by watching this, dear listeners, the algorithm will decide you're someone who is interested in maybe slower discussions that go into a bit of a gentle depth on these kinds of topics, and will serve you more stuff like this. So that's what I'm hoping anyway. I think, Jo, I could probably assume you're a great fan of Robert Macfarlane, although we've not discussed him before, but another really brilliant nature writer and award-winning in motivator for so many conservationists out there. And I think that's something that Rob seems to do consciously, is leverage Instagram, which many people see as quite a poisonous platform, but to put really positive stories on there, and beautiful photography of his own or of his dad's, showcasing the natural world. And I think it's really interesting how we can do a sort of Trojan horse on these platforms that could be addiction machines and really toxic, but if we put the right things onto them, we can use them as tools to bring people together around common interests. So thank you for investing your time in having this discussion here. And are there any other ways people can go out online and find out about and get involved with your writing? What would be something that a Stornoway fan could go out and do, apart from, of course, buying the book?
Yeah. I mean, you talk about Instagram, where I don't have a particularly good presence, but I certainly agree with wanting to flood the internet with hopeful, beautiful photos and images that make people feel good. And so that's one thing maybe that people can just continue to do. I've got a couple of talks coming up, and I'll put details of them on Instagram. That's kind of the primary platform that I use. And I have a Substack newsletter where I would also send out this kind of information. So if people want to come and hear me talk some more on the topic, then that would be the place to start, I guess.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you and collaborate on this. So thank you very much for making the time. And any last thoughts for Stornoway fans out there? I could also close with a reading, of course. I haven't planned one, but I could turn to a random page.
Yeah, go for it. Do that. My only closing word would be that everybody should love the unloved and rethink the repulsive. Those are my key messages. And
Excellent.
Thank you so much for having me on to chat. It's been great.
Okay, a pleasure. I'm turned to something which feels like it might be interesting and enticing for potential readers. Okay. So, okay, everybody, let me know what you make of this. This is from page 105. It's the chapter is called "Snake in the Grass" from Beauty of the Beasts by Jo Wimpenny. Nonetheless, if snakes have some form of self-awareness, we'd expect that they might show it in other contexts too. Dogs, for example, as well as responding differently to their own scent and that of other dogs, also pay attention to their body size when navigating their way through physical obstacles, suggesting some level of bodily awareness. And there's some evidence that snakes might do as well. Copperhead rat snakes get considerably fatter after they've eaten, and in an experiment where individuals were presented with a range of different diameter escape holes after feeding, they were less likely to choose holes that they could no longer fit through. Combining this body size awareness with the chemical mirror experiments provides an even stronger case for snakes having some sort of self-recognition. That's pretty cool. So, I could learn so much on every page of this book. There's a handful on every page of really interesting stuff that never even thought about before. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ali.
Great. Pleasure. I'll just use the last few seconds to say thank you, everybody, for tuning in and giving us your time, and go buy the book and Take care. We'll see you soon.